His leg had been rotting for 11 years, not slowly, not quietly, in a way that his physicians could smell from 3 rooms away, through 2 closed doors, through thick stone walls, before they had even knocked. Henry VIII, King of England, supreme head of the church, the most powerful man in the most powerful country in Europe, was dying in a room that smelled like a slaughterhouse. And the people closest to him were too terrified to tell him. It is January 27th, 1547. Henry has approximately 18 hours left. And what happens in those 18 hours? Who enters this room? What they say, what they hide, and what one specific man decides to do in the final hour will change England forever. By the end of this video, you will understand why the most powerful king in English history spent his final day completely alone in a way that no prisoner in his own tower ever was, and why the man who finally told Henry he was dying had to choose between his king's soul and his own head. That choice is coming. First, the room. Whitehall Palace, the king's bedchamber, January 27th, 1547. The fire has been burning since midnight. Not for warmth. The room is already close and thick with the particular heat that a sick body generates when it has been fighting itself for years. The fire burns because Henry demands light. He has always demanded light. Darkness, for a man who has spent 38 years making every room he enters bend around his presence, is not something he tolerates. He is 55 years old. He weighs somewhere between 300 and 350 pounds. His waist, which the Venetian ambassador measured at 32 inches when Henry was 39, now requires a specially constructed chair that 2 men must carry between rooms. He cannot walk unaided. He cannot dress without 4 attendants. He cannot lower himself onto his bed without a mechanism of ropes and pulleys that his engineers designed specifically for this purpose. The leg ulcer that has been open since 1536, 11 years, has not healed. It has never healed. It produces a discharge that must be dressed multiple times daily. The pain from it is constant. It is the kind of pain that changes a person over years in ways that are not dramatic but are total, that makes a man who was once described as the most charming prince in Christendom into something that the people around him navigate rather than approach. His physicians know he is dying. They have known for days. Not one of them has told him. Here is why no one has told him. And this is the part that changes how you understand everything that follows. Henry VIII, in the final years of his reign, passed a law. Not a complicated law. A specific, targeted law with one primary purpose. It became treason to predict the king's death. Not to plot it. Not to wish for it. To predict it. To say, in any form, in any context, to any person, that the king was going to die was high treason. Punishable by execution. Think about what that law does to a physician. You are the royal doctor. You have examined the king. You know with certainty, from the progression of the ulcer, from the swelling in his legs, from the fever patterns, from everything your training tells you, that this man has days left, possibly hours. If you tell him, you have just committed treason. You have predicted the king's death. The law does not make exceptions for medical professionals delivering diagnoses. The law is the law. So the physicians say nothing. They dress the wound. They administer the treatments they have always administered. They maintain the performance of management, the suggestion that everything is being handled, that the king is being cared for, that improvement is possible. And Henry lies in that room, in that smell, and either believes them or does not believe them, but cannot afford to ask plainly because plainly asking would require someone to answer plainly. And a plain answer is now illegal. This is what absolute power looks like from the inside, not control. A room full of people performing normality while the walls close in. The men who are managing Henry's death without telling him about it are some of the most powerful people in England, and they are not managing it out of loyalty. They are managing it out of position. Henry's heir is 9 years old. Edward, his son, by Jane Seymour. Jane, who died 12 days after giving birth, the wife Henry mourned longest and perhaps genuinely loved, is a 9-year-old boy who has been educated by Protestant tutors in a Protestant direction that his father never formally endorsed. The men around Henry's deathbed are the men who will run England for the next decade, the Council of Regency, and they need Henry to die on their timeline. Not too early, not in a way that triggers the wrong succession discussions, not before certain documents are signed and certain appointments confirmed. Edward Seymour, Jane's brother, Edward's uncle, needs to be Lord Protector. This requires paperwork. The paperwork requires Henry's signature. Henry can still sign things, but Henry's signature requires Henry to be conscious, cooperative, and not in one of his rages. So the men in the anteroom outside the bedchamber are doing two things simultaneously. They are preventing anyone from telling Henry he is dying, because a dying king who knows he is dying becomes unpredictable. And they are managing the paperwork. Power does not stop for grief. Power especially does not stop for grief when the grief is for the source of the power. Drop a comment right now. If you had been one of Henry's physicians in that room, knowing what you knew, knowing the law, would you have told him? Tell us, and tell us where in the world you are watching from tonight. We read every single one. Inside the bedchamber, Henry is aware of something. Not necessarily that he is dying, or rather, not necessarily willing to name it that, but that the texture of the room has changed. The way people move around him has changed. The quality of the silences between answers when he asks questions has changed. Henry VIII spent 38 years reading rooms. He became king at 17. He has been, since that moment, the most observed person in England, every expression analyzed, every preference cataloged, every shift in mood studied by hundreds of people whose survival depended on getting the reading right. That skill runs in both directions. He knows what it looks like when people are hiding something from him. He has seen it on the faces of men who were about to be arrested. He has seen it on the faces of wives who were about to be accused. He has seen it enough times that the expression itself, the careful neutral face, the slightly delayed response, the micro-adjustment in posture, is as readable to him as a written document. He is seeing it now, in every face that enters this room, in every physician who dresses his wound and reports improvement, in every counselor who brings paperwork and maintains the performance of business as usual. He cannot ask. The law he passed will not let him ask. He has trapped himself in a room where the truth is illegal. The pain in the leg is worse tonight. This is not a small thing. Henry has lived with chronic pain for 11 years. He has a tolerance for it that a person who has not experienced long-term pain cannot fully imagine. A baseline level of suffering that has become so normalized that it no longer registers as unusual. When the pain breaks through that baseline, when it rises above the level he has learned to function inside, it means something. It means the body is accelerating. The physicians dress the wound again. They apply the treatments. They maintain their expressions. Henry asks for Archbishop Cranmer. This is the moment the anteroom has been waiting for. Not with fear, with relief. Because Henry asking for his archbishop means Henry knows. Not in the form of a diagnosis. Not in the form of a medical report. In the form of a man who has spent 38 years making calculations about power, looking at the room, looking at the faces, doing the arithmetic. He knows. He has probably known for days. He could not ask. He has been waiting for someone to reach for him first. Cranmer is sent for. Thomas Cranmer, Archbishop of Canterbury, rides to Whitehall in the night. He has been one of Henry's most loyal servants for 15 years. He survived the fall of Thomas More. He survived the fall of Thomas Cromwell. He navigated the impossible geometry of Henry's theology. A king who broke with Rome but burned Protestants, who dissolved the monasteries but insisted on traditional doctrine, who remade the English church in his own image, and then held that image absolutely still while the Reformation moved around it. Cranmer survived all of this by being genuinely useful and genuinely moderate and genuinely capable of making Henry feel understood in theological matters that Henry found both important and complicated. He is also, tonight, facing the most dangerous conversation of his career. He has been summoned to the bedchamber of a dying man who passed a law making it treason to say the man is dying. He is the king's spiritual advisor. His job, his actual job, the job he has held for 15 years, is to prepare dying Christians for death, which requires telling them they are dying. He dismounts in the courtyard. The palace is very quiet, the kind of quiet that a large building full of people produces when everyone is waiting for the same thing and no one is speaking about it. He walks to the bedchamber door. He enters. What happens in that room in the next hour is not fully recorded, not because no one cared, because the people who were present understood that a precise record of what was said, who said what, exactly how it was framed, was a document that could destroy them later. In a kingdom where predicting the king's death was treason, a written account of the archbishop telling the king he was dying was evidence. So what we have is the shape of what happened, not the exact words. Cranmer takes Henry's hand. Henry by this point cannot speak clearly. The fever has progressed. The body that has been fighting itself for 11 years, that powered its way through 6 marriages and 1 religious revolution and the systematic destruction of everyone who became inconvenient, that body is shutting down in stages, the way large complicated things shut down. He cannot deliver a formal confession. He cannot receive communion in the way the church prescribes. He cannot do any of the ritual things that a 16th century Christian was supposed to do before dying. Cranmer asks him to signal his faith by squeezing his hand. Henry squeezes his hand. That is the last recorded physical action of Henry VIII. A hand squeeze in the dark, witnessed by the one man who had the authority to receive it and the courage to ask for it, and the specific combination of loyalty and faith that made asking for it worth the risk. By the time the room is fully light again, Henry is dead. The body is not announced immediately. Henry VIII died sometime in the early hours of January 28, 1547. His death was not publicly announced for 3 days. 3 days. The council needed time. Documents needed to be finalized. Edward Seymour needed to secure his position as Lord Protector before the news created the instability that a royal death always created. The machinery of power needed to be repositioned before the death became official, because the moment it became official, the calculation changed, and everyone in the anteroom needed to be standing in exactly the right place when it changed. So for 3 days, servants continued to bring meals to the king's chamber. The pretense of daily life was maintained. The same physicians who had not told him he was dying now maintained the performance of attendance to a man who was already gone. The palace that had spent years performing normalcy around a dying king now performed normalcy around a dead one. The news broke on January 31st. 9-year-old Edward VI was proclaimed king. Edward Seymour became Lord Protector. The paperwork was in order. Henry VIII was buried at Windsor beside Jane Seymour. He had requested this years before his death, that he be placed next to the wife who had given him his son. The funeral was enormous. The coffin required 12 pallbearers. Contemporary accounts describe the procession as the largest in living memory, not because Henry was particularly beloved at the end, but because the machinery of royal ceremony did not scale to human scale. It scaled to the size of what Henry had made himself, which was a monument to will and terror and 38 years of absolute authority. The 3,000 masses he ordered said for his soul were said. The coffin reached Windsor. It was placed in the vault. A contemporary account, one of the few that does not seem to have been written with one eye on who might read it, notes that as the coffin was lowered, something happened to it. The lead lining had cracked. What emerged from that crack was described in terms so specific and so unambiguous that the account has been questioned ever since, because it is the kind of detail that sounds invented but sits too precisely in the historical record to dismiss. The body of Henry VIII had begun to decompose before it was buried. A dog found what leaked onto the floor of the vault. A monk who witnessed it said, and this is documented, this is in the record, that it fulfilled a prophecy, that a man had once told Henry that dogs would lick his blood, as they had licked the blood of Ahab. Henry had the man executed for saying it. Henry VIII executed approximately 70,000 people during his reign. The number varies by source. Some historians say lower. Some say the executions under his authority, when you include the broader suppressions, run considerably higher. But 70,000 is the conservative figure. He dissolved 900 monasteries. He broke England from Rome. He married 6 women. He had 2 of them beheaded. He had 1 of them executed for reasons that most historians now believe were entirely fabricated. He built Hampton Court. He built the English Navy. He commissioned the King James Bible process that his daughter would eventually complete. He created the Church of England, not as a theological project, but as a mechanism for getting a divorce, which then became a theological revolution that changed the world. He died in a room that smelled of his own rotting body, surrounded by people who were too afraid of him, alive and dying, to tell him the truth. And the last human contact he had was a hand squeeze in the dark, offered to an archbishop who risked his head to ask for it. Power, when you accumulate enough of it, does not protect you from death. It protects you from being told about death. Henry VIII spent the last days of his life in a room where the truth was illegal. Not because his enemies put him there, because he put himself there, with a law passed in his own name that made honesty toward him a capital offense. The king who remade England could not remake the body that was ending. The king who executed people for predicting his death could not prevent the prediction from being correct. The king who was never told no for 38 years, almost never told no, died in a room where the final no was not a word but a silence. A careful, terrified, legally mandated silence that filled the space where truth should have been. Cranmer told him anyway, not in words, in a hand squeeze in the dark, which was, in the circumstances, the bravest thing anyone did in that palace in 38 years. That is the last 24 hours of Henry VIII. What happens next, to Edward, to Cranmer, to England itself, is the subject of the next video. And the first thing that happens will surprise you, because the 9-year-old king who inherited the most complicated religious and political situation in English history made one decision in his first week on the throne that his father never would have made. What was it? That is coming. Drop a comment below. Do you think Henry knew he was dying and chose not to ask? Or do you think the performance around him was good enough to fool even him? Tell us. And tell us which country you are watching from tonight. If this changed how you think about power, share it. And subscribe. The next video is already waiting.